Chapter 41. Vraska. She stood outside the apartment door. Frankly, after the idea had struck her that Bond would go to ground somewhere he felt safe, everything else fell quickly into place. After all, where would a planeswalker like Bond feel safest? Obviously, where no one would ever think to look for him. And where was that? Ravnica. He was one of the most hated individuals on this planet, and he didn't have to stay on this planet. Therefore, he'd never come back to this planet. Therefore, that's exactly where he'd go upon leaving Kaladesh. And once Vraska had gone down that path of logic, the rest was child's play. It was ridiculously easy for her Golgari sources to track Bond down, to learn of the purchase of this house made months before most people in the World City had ever heard of Nicol Bolas. Almost before most people in the Azorius Senate had ever heard of Dovin Baan. She took a step back and kicked in the door. Baan, a tidy white bandage wrapped around his head to cover his missing eyes, stood behind the kitchen counter in the one-bedroom apartment, eating turnips with a knife and fork. He put down his utensils, tilted his head, sniffed the air, and said, "I thought if anyone could find me, it would be you. But I'll admit, I did not expect the Golgari Queen would come herself. I'm honored." She scanned the room for signs of booby traps. There was nothing. Or nothing obvious, anyway. She knew Bond was a man of subtlety and strategy, however, so she didn't relax her guard. "Did you really not think I would come?" she asked. "If so, I'll be quite disappointed in your legendary powers of deduction." He bowed slightly, acknowledging the lie. She took a step forward. Waving a hand before his face, he said, "I might remind Her Majesty that a Gorgon's power cannot petrify a blind man." Drawing her cutlass, Vraska said, "Her Majesty has other ways to kill." "Of course, and you could kill me. But I know your weakness, Queen Vraska." "Do you now?" "Indeed. Her Majesty's weakness is Her Majesty's love of the Golgari." "That's not a weakness. It's a strength." "Weakness and strength are not mutually exclusive. So in exchange for my life, I offer you my services." Vraska scoffed. "Why would I, or the Golgari, require the services of a fallen Azorius guild master?" "Because I can tell you how to secure the Golgari crown and render Matka Izoni impotent." He reached behind a pile of turnips and held up what appeared to be a small jar of live spiders. Chapter 42. Chandra Nalar. "She's back on Ravnica," Jace said. "Who?" "Vraska. I can sense her mind again, but I want more information before I see her." "Why?" He started to speak, but couldn't find an answer. His face sank. Or maybe he found an answer and doesn't like it. He said quietly, I want to know if I'm being lied to without having to read her thoughts." "Okay," Chandra said. Her voice still sounded numb and dead to her own ears. "I should just trust her, I suppose." "She's a hard woman to trust, I imagine." "Then she's found the perfect match." Chandra managed a smile and gave Jace's arm a reassuring squeeze. She knew intellectually it was what he needed, though the action felt dishonest. "I want to help him. I just don't feel it." But it seemed to buoy his spirits a bit. She said, "If we're not going to Korozda, Where are we headed? Fire and blood. Is that a tavern? More of a block party. A multi-block party. Rakdos and his minions have been celebrating his victory over Bolus for almost 24 hours. His victory? Yes. It's funny how the story changes depending on the storyteller. Within minutes, they could hear the chants of a substantial crowd. Bleed and burn! Bleed and burn! Bleed and burn! A few minutes more, and they could see the glow of what Chandra could sense was a massive bonfire peeking over the intervening buildings. It's just around the corner, Jace said. That's as far as you go, Beleren. The Blood Witch Exava melted out of the darkness. You're not welcome at this celebration. Now Jace smiled. And why is that? You're no fun. I can be fun. Also, I don't like you, and neither does the Defiler. Exava turned to Chandra. You, on the other hand, are more than welcome at the party. She tried to sell it. It's a real chance to cut loose. Sample some true freedom. Admit it. Wouldn't you love to burn down a few city blocks of this plane? That does sound appealing. A big fire enough to defrost my heart. Chandra forced herself to ask, have they been evacuated? Why would we do that? Why is it still tempting? Damn it, what's wrong with me? I'll pass, she said. Your loss, sighed the Blood Witch. Jace said, I don't need to crash your little soiree. Little? Exava sounded outraged. But I do need a few questions answered. Exava glowered for a moment, then her face broke into a smile. It was not the kind of smile that made one feel happy or safe. She said, Then you've come to the right place. I have many answers for you, Jace. We've only come to talk. There's no need for things to get nasty. Oh, reason, not the need. Nasty's where I live. She snapped her fingers. Nothing happened. Chandra and Jace both looked around, but nothing seemed to have changed. Yet Exava's expression was borderline triumphant. What aren't we seeing? Chandra whispered. I don't know. Around the corner, the crowd continued to chant, Bleed and burn! Punctuated by a handful of shrieking screams of pain that indicated the mantra wasn't just symbolic. But when the noise briefly died down, Chandra thought she heard the sound of running water. She looked down at her feet. She and Jace had been standing on a sewer grate, and a dark liquid was swiftly rising around their feet. I have blood on my boots, Chandra said flatly. Oh crap, Jace muttered, looking down. Exava cackled and twisted both hands in a circular motion, and two blooded elementals twisted up out of the flow and reached their liquid limbs toward the mouths of her two foes. Drown in blood, Exava hissed. Chandra wasted no time. She let loose searing torrents of flame from either hand, evaporating the elementals, and maybe singeing Jace. Just a bit. In any case, he winced and shielded his face with his near hand. Should feel bad about that. Why don't I feel bad about that? Exava winced too. Winced, and then screeched in fury. But now, Jace snapped his fingers, and the Blood Witch abruptly went limp. Her arms fell to her sides, and her face went blank. Jace said, I told you we only came to talk, but to be honest, I was kinda hoping you'd pull something like this. Now I really feel no compunction about reading your mind. It's a feeble excuse, I'll admit, but also, I don't like you either, Exava, and you're way less fun than you think. His eyes glowed briefly blue, then they returned to normal, and Exava simultaneously fell into a heap of the cobblestones Jace and Chandra turned and walked back the way they came. "Well?" she asked. "Did you find out where Vraska went?" He hesitated, briefly, but then came to a decision and said, "The guild sent Vraska to Kaladesh to kill Dovin Baan." Chandra's cold heart suddenly felt a little heat. No. If anyone's gonna kill Dovin Baan, it's me! Jace's eyebrow went up. "You're not a killer, Chandra. We've been through this. I've killed. You know I've killed. I know we've been through this, and I also know you're not a cold-blooded killer. That's not the only blood I have now, Jace." She groused. "Well, if anyone deserves death, it's Baan. Anyway, he definitely needs to be brought to justice for what he did to Ravnica and Kaladesh." "Agreed, but you're not thinking about the ramifications. Baan's not the only target. The guilds have hired hits on Baan and Tezzeret, and Liliana." "Oh, yeah. Look, no one knows more than I do that Liliana is no innocent. But she did kill Bolus. And Nisa said Gideon would want us to redeem her. Or try, at least. What are you going to do?" "I need to talk to Vraska. I'm ready to talk to her now." "Go. Find her." "What are you going to do?" "For starters, get a drink? Or two. Or a dozen." "Really?" "I need to think. I haven't done much of that lately. It's probably time." Suddenly, Jace seemed reluctant to leave Chandra alone. "Are you okay?" he asked her. "No," she said. "Obviously I'm not okay, but I'll figure things out. Go, find Vraska. Try to be happy." He had started to go, but as she said that last sentence, he stopped in his tracks. "That sounded like a goodbye, Chandra." "It was. A have a good life kind of goodbye." "Well, I wasn't, Jace. I'm not suicidal, if that's what you're thinking." "I wasn't thinking that at all, actually. But now—" "Oh, please, don't read in. I promise you, I just need time." "You sure?" I'm sure. And I'm also sure I'll see you soon." He looked concerned. "Concerned enough to read my thoughts?" "Okay," he said finally. "Take care." "No, the new Jace wouldn't do that." "You too," she said. He split off. Chandra walked on. The heat of their minor skirmish with Ixava was quickly fading. The ice was forming again. She felt torn and yet distanced from both options she was trying to choose between. Do I chase Bond to bring him to justice? Or maybe even to incinerate him myself? Or do I chase Liliana and try to save her? Have I even begun to forgive her for costing us kids? She should go home to her mother's place and to her mother's arms on Kaladesh. She should really try to put Ravnica and all that went with it behind her. But that's not gonna happen. That's never gonna happen. She had lied to Jace about wanting to get a drink, because she thought it was a socially acceptable response to all she's been through recently, and would free him to see Vraska. It hadn't worked, hadn't allayed his obvious concern for her. In fact, it had backfired. It was too out of character for Chandra. It's just not my style, and everyone knows it. She spotted a tavern called the Titan's Keg. She went inside. It was full of giants. She slipped between a couple of them and walked right up to the bar. With some effort, she managed to climb up onto an immense bar stool. The tapster, an ogre who amid any other crowd would have seemed gargantuan, asked, "What'll you have, little lady?" Can't tell if he's being condescending or literal. "A hard cider," she said. "No, a Bumbat whiskey. Or 2. Or a dozen. Chapter 43. Tezzeret. A storm was building. Tezzeret immediately sensed it was the work of Ral Zarek. He could practically taste Zarek's power. "The Storm Mage is coming," he said to Brock and Kernst. The homunculus squealed.
"What would you have us do, boss?"
"Are the traps set? Both the old and the new."
"Yes, master."
"Yes, boss," the pair replied in unison. Tezzeret's fortress was chock full of snares and booby traps, some that he had installed and others which he had left in place, that pre-existed his taking possession of the structure. The Seeker's Sanctum, as it had once been known, had once been occupied by the Seekers of Karmot, an organization he'd been exiled from as a youth. Refusing to recognize his genius, the Seekers had said that poor Tide Hollow scum like him had no place among their number. He had later learned that the Seekers were a front for Nicol Bolas, and when the Elder Dragon's attentions were elsewhere, Tezzeret had returned to the Seekers, and had slain them all, down to the very last fellow of the Arcane Council. He had even killed a hierarch leader of the Seekers' inner circle. It had all been ridiculously easy. He had struck quickly and savagely, and most of the Seekers of Karmot had barely had time to put up a fight. The few who had fell before him quite routinely. The only Seeker who had escaped Tezzeret's vengeance was Seeker Adept Silas Wren, and only because Wren wasn't present when Tezzeret arrived. He defeated Wren in battle years earlier, but he hadn't quite finished him off. He loved to do that now, but hadn't been able to locate the smirking bastard. It grated on him that Wren was still alive. It made him angry. "Well, I'll just have to take that anger out on Zarek. Should get at least a little pleasure from that." Tezzeret had been preparing his next moves, his post-Bolas stratagems, for nearly a decade, so there was simply no way he'd allow Ral Zarek to interfere with his plans now. Chapter 44. Kaya. Kaya had remained virtually prone on her back for next to an hour. Between planeswalking twice in a day and planeswalking with Rat, she was thoroughly exhausted. Rat had seemed to recover slightly faster and was soon sitting up, removing diamonds from her pockets to calculate the value of her haul. Watching her, Teo had asked, "Are those really worth something on Ravnica?" "Oh yeah," Rat had said, her eyes sparkling as much as the diamonds. Kaya had added, "The cargo of a single pocket would be worth a fortune on almost any plane but Goba Khan." "Why in Keru's name didn't I pick up any myself? There's a lot of freedom in that many stones." "I'll split 'em with you," Rat had said, probably reading her a bit. "They're yours, Rat. I'm not going to take... I'd need help fencing them anyway, you know. We might as well split the profits." She had looked up at Teo then. 3 ways. Kaya had nodded. "All right. A 3-way split. A third each for me and both of my partners." Rat had squealed unintelligibly, punched Teo in the arm and said, "You hear that? We're her partners." "Ow! Could you at least hit me in another spot? I think my arm is turning permanently purple right there." "Sorry," she had said, still grinning broadly. Honestly, it raised Kaya's spirits. She had feared Teo would miss Gobakan, but he seemed happy, even relieved to be traveling with her and Rat. Well, I know why he's happy to travel with Rat. I probably know it better than he does, for now. And Rat was just, well, blossoming on this journey. Kaya had also worried that at least a part of Rat might be jealous of her solitude. Certainly, Kaya knew Rat was lonely and craved relationships, but adjusting to constant companionship can be quite a strain. It was a bit of a strain at times for Kaya, and she had never been nearly as isolated as Araethia Shakta. But Rat seemed to soak up the camaraderie, perhaps making up for lost time. More than that, and to Kaya's sincere delight, she found she was truly taking pleasure in their company. If someone told her even a week ago that she'd relish time spent in the constant company of two teenagers, she'd never have believed it, and yet it was a joy to be with both of them. There was such a lack of jadedness about them. Of course, Teo's innocence was easy to understand. Just a few hours on Gobakan had revealed the place to be, at least from Kaya's point of view, a true backwater of a plain. But given Rat's condition, the girl would have earned, even in her short 16 years, every cynical impulse that might have struck her, and yet Araethia Shakta was the furthest thing from cynical.
Between the two of them, I think they actually give me hope for the multiverse.
She had found herself laughing. Teo had looked at her questioningly. A smiling Rat had just gone on counting her diamonds, saying,
"We love you too, mistress."
Kaya had said,
"Please, Rat, if you love me, can't you call me Kaya?"
Rat had looked up, almost panicked.
"No, mistress, no. Can't do that. It's hard enough for me to not call Teo Mr. Virata."
Teo had given her the eye.
"It is not."
She had giggled then.
"No, it's not. Saying Mr. Virata just now sounded kinda silly. You're just Teo, I guess, like Hikara was just Hikara." "Then why can't I just be Kaya?"
Rat had shaken her head.
"That's not how we met. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I just can't do it."
"Yet," Kaya had said. Amusing Teo eventually said to Rat,
"So, we both love Kaya, huh?
"Does that mean all three of us love each other?" She had punched him in response.
"Ow! I swear the boy must like getting hit."
Now Kaya, Teo, and Rat were carefully heading toward the mansion, with Rat in the lead, acting as an advance scout. Kaya whispered a warning.
"Remember, Rat, this is a different world, and you may not be as invisible here as you are on Ravnica."
Without looking back, Rat offered up another of her shrugs and said,
"Gobakan was a different world too, and I was just as insignificant there as anywhere I've ever been. Not that I've been many wheres, but still, you know? Anyway, I'll be right back."
She scurried on ahead, leaving Kaya alone with Teo. The boy had been silent ever since they had set out. More than once, he'd started to speak, only to swallow the words. It happened again, and Kaya, though she had a pretty good idea of what was coming, said,
"Okay, Teo, spit it out."
He looked a little surprised. He had grown accustomed to Rat reading him, but hadn't expected it from Kaya. She prompted him to get it over with.
"You've made it clear you're not thrilled with this mission."
He shook his head.
I'm sorry, Kaya. Please know I'm happy to be traveling with you and Rat. But this... it doesn't seem right. We've come to kill Liliana for collaborating with the dragon, but she switched sides. And she's the one who's actually killed Nicol Bolas. Yes, exactly. I mean, maybe she's worthy of redemption. Or maybe she should stand trial for her crimes, but simply to kill her. Teo, I know you're not a killer. By Keru's grave, you never even killed an Eternal, and I want you to understand that I'm not going to let you become a killer now. This job, this mission, it's on me. I appreciate you and Rat having my back. In fact, I'm pretty much counting on the two of you protecting me. But I'm the assassin here, and this employment is not new to me. My usual targets have been ghosts and the undead, entities that needed to move on and leave life to the living. But I've also known plenty of the living that needed to die, and I haven't been shy about killing them either, though I've never done it lightly. I have a code.
It hasn't always been terribly consistent, but I make decisions in the moment, and there are few of those decisions that I regret. At least, not on this topic. But Liliana Vess killed hundreds, if not thousands, of Ravnikans and Planeswalkers before switching sides. I'm not saying she doesn't have her excuses. I'm not even saying she wasn't coerced. But in the end, she made choices. Choices she has to live with. Choices she'll have to die for. From the trees, Rat hissed, "Over here!" Kaya looked at Teo, who looked back and then nodded. They moved to catch up to Rat together. "Here's the mansion." "There's the mansion," Rat said, "but it's not the way Miss Ballard described it." That was true. Jaya had described a ruin, something that was barely standing. The house of Vess was nothing like that. It was in good repair, elegant and recently painted. Torches lit the entryway, and noble men and women were entering what sounded from outside, to be a rather boisterous party. Teo whispered, "Are we sure this is the right place?" "It's the right place," Rat said. She pointed toward another group of people, servants, apparently, wearing gold collars, who, even at night, were working to repair a broken gutter. Others brought food and even flowers inside for the party. I went up close to the servants and eavesdropped. They're not really servants. They're pretty much prisoners, controlled somehow by those shiny collars they wear. First time I've ever seen something shiny or sparkly that I didn't want. Oh, and I heard them whispering about their mistress. It's Liliana, Miss Ravenhair herself." Kaya looked to Teo and said, "So, Liliana Vess fled the carnage on Ravnica and returned to her home on Dominaria, where she imprisoned the locals and set herself up in grand evil style. I think that confirms she's one of the living that needs to die." Teo said nothing, but he nodded minutely. Kaya turned back to Rat. "I assume Liliana's at the party." "Sounds that way. Stay put. I'll find a safe way into the mansion." Once again, she scurried off, leaving Teo and Kaya alone. Kaya said, "I don't want you to think I enjoy this." No, I don't think that. I don't want you to think I'm going to fight you on this. I see your point of view, but is it alright if it makes me sad?" "It's very alright. If this ever gets easy or pleasant for either of us, then we've definitely taken the wrong path." He offered up a sad smile, and she grasped his shoulder. "We'll keep each other honest," she said. "Agreed?" "Yes, agreed." They waited a bit longer. He sniffed the air and scowled. "What is it?" she asked. "Something seems familiar. Smells familiar, but I can't quite put my finger on it. Maybe it's just a tree or plant common to Gobakan and Dominaria." He looked around the swampy environs. "That seemed unlikely. Wait, I thought this place was called Caligo." "This place is called Caligo. This plane is Dominaria." "Oh, I had that backwards. It's understandable. You've had a lot thrown at you over the last couple of days." He exhaled. "Well, that's true. Do you know when I first met you, I thought your name was Jaya. I thought she was Kaya." "Yes, as your abbot pointed out, it's awkward for us to travel together." Teo paused, then said, "He's not as bad as you think." "I hope not." They were silent again, until Rat returned. "There's something you both need to see." She waved for them to follow her, and they did. She took the long way round the back of the mansion until they came upon a plot of land, a garden not unlike the abbot's garden at the monastery. As with the repair work on the mansion, Liliana's servants, her prisoners, were working the garden even at night. There were 3 women there, each methodically weeding or planting, or something. Kaya didn't know much about gardening. Eventually, Two of the women picked up baskets of what appeared to be cucumbers and headed off, leaving the last woman to work the soil alone. Hidden in the trees, Kaya turned to Rat and asked, "Why are we here?"
The woman, the last servant there, look!
Kaya took another look at the collared woman. Her back was to them at the moment, but Kaya was now fairly certain she was pulling a weed, then inching back half a foot or so before pulling another, and so forth.
I don't understand. Is it something about the weeds? Wait! Wait for her to turn.
When the woman came to the end of the row, she turned around to start back down the next. She lifted her head to wipe her brow, and the moonlight shone down upon her face. The face of Liliana Vess.